Sorry, I'm having to test different batteries. Some of them were working, some were not. So, like I was saying, happy Wednesday. We're going to continue doing a deep dive into some of the attitude, intention, focus, mindset, because that's where everything starts. Everything starts with a mindset. Controlling the story, controlling the narrative, not just for your consumers, but for yourself. Wherever your focus goes is where your energy flows. Wherever your energy flows is how you show up every single day. And we as human beings have a need to stay consistent with the identity that we have formed for ourselves. So if we have these thoughts, these attitudes, intentions, and beliefs, and we have a need to stay consistent with that identity because we believe that's who we are, we're going to continue to show up that way until we decide to make some changes and do something different. So we're going to talk a little bit more about mindset today. We're going to hopefully do some coaching through this as well to kind of help coach you through your mindset and your attitude. So let's go ahead. Let's get started. Jump on in. All right. So just reiterating some things. Mindset is simply just a habit. That's all that it is. It's a habit. Most of us don't understand that our mindset is just a series of thoughts, a series of reactions to things that we allow. It is the things that we choose on a day-to-day basis to focus on, to think on, to believe in. When something happens to us, everything that we feel, everything that we experience is just a reaction to the things that happen around us, to us, for us, however you want to see it. And as Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Because that mindset just creates this success cycle. If you believe that you can, do you think your potential is greater or lesser? It's going to be greater if you think you can. If you believe it's going to happen, you're going to have a greater potential. But if you don't believe it's going to happen, you're going to have lesser potential. And with that potential is going to dictate how you show up and take action. And if I have greater potential with a higher belief in myself, I'll take stronger action. Those stronger actions are going to yield better results. And those better results just go right back and reinstill and said, I told you, I knew if this happened, I knew we could do it, I knew it would show up that way. So just understanding that your mindset is just a habit. And how do you form a habit? Repetition. Doing some things over and over again until they become so ingrained in your nervous system, fired and wired. I can ask every single one of you, tell me, chat into the chat here, which hand do you brush your teeth with every morning? Right or left? Which one do you brush your teeth with every morning? And most of you will have this answer pretty easily. Some of you will have to think about it. Right, left, right. So that is just a habit, but I can tell you and show you, because I have kids that are younger, of a 7-year-old who has not formed the full habit. Sometimes he uses this hand, sometimes he uses that one. Sometimes he starts on the top, sometimes he goes on the bottom. Sometimes it's on the outside. He hasn't formed that full habit and found which one works best for him. Same thing. Which leg do you put in your pants first every morning? Half of you will have to think about it. All your brain and body does is forms a habit to make your life easier. It goes through this process and it says, hold on, if we're going to get dressed every day or brush our teeth every day, I'm going to take that and I'm going to form a habit to make life easier. So mindset is the same thing. As things happen to you, your brain tries to keep you safe. So if something happens to you, somebody looks at you with this look, with their hands on their hips and looking down at you, your brain says, oop, they're angry. I have to get defensive. I have to get scared. I have to start justifying myself. I have to run away. Your brain starts to form a habit that keeps you safe. So as a child, you do those things. So as you get older, when somebody looks at you with a questioning manner, it's not the same look your parents gave you of a disappointment, of frustrated anger or whatever. It's just a look of confusion. You get defensive. You run away. You get scared. You try to justify everything that you've done. So your mindset that you have right now is just a habit basically of reactions that you formed over time since you were a kid. So just understanding that your mindset is just a habit, and any habit can be changed. Keys to changing a habit. 3 things: identify, interrupt, replace. If I did not want to brush my teeth with my right hand anymore every morning, I would identify the issue. The issue is I'm brushing my teeth with my right hand. My right hand is broken. I can't continue to do that with my right hand anymore. I need to use my left. Identify what is going on, what is happening, and this is what it is. Identify the pattern. The pattern is when I go to brush my teeth, I pick the toothpaste up with this hand, I put it onto my right hand on the toothbrush, and I brush with this hand. Identify. Interrupt. You have to create a shake in that pattern. You have to create a disruption of the pattern. And a lot of times, I've used these terms before, your physiology, your focus, and your language, if you can interrupt those 3 things, you have a much stronger likelihood of changing a pattern. So I want to identify, interrupt, and replace that pattern. So identify that I'm brushing my teeth with my right hand, I need to change it. Interrupt it, make a massive change in my physiology, my focus, and my language, and then replace it with something different. Replace it with, my left hand is going to be better because my left hand has never done this before, but the more that it does it, it's going to form a new pattern and a new habit, and as it does that, my teeth will get cleaner. And then my left arm will get stronger, and altogether it's going to be a better thing to do with my left hand, and you start doing it with your left hand, and you focus on doing it with your left hand, and you identify, interrupt, replace the pattern. Same thing with mindset. You identify that every time something happens, you have this thought, and you have this negative thought, this positive thought, this not very enlightening thought. Whatever that is, identify every time I pull into traffic, I get pissed off. You want to identify when that happens, be prepared for it, and interrupt that pattern and replace it with something different. Thank you so much for this traffic. Thank you so much for slowing me down, because I know further down the road there was going to be an accident. Somebody was going to pull out and hit me. And because you slowed me down for 30 seconds, it saved me. Everything that you think is made up. So why not make up something that makes you feel better? All of your mindset patterns, all of your attitude patterns, your emotional reaction patterns, those are mindsets. All of them are patterns, and they're all made up because of something that happened to you at some point. Now you have this reaction. So just identifying that everything that you do is just a pattern. The human brain is the most efficient machine that's ever built. And now once we start to see that everything is just a pattern, you've created an identity about yourself. This is who I am. This is how I am. This is how I react to things. When someone does this, it means they're angry. That means that I have to prove to them why they shouldn't be angry, and I get defensive. And I justify everything that I did. So no, you shouldn't be angry because everything was fine the way this was. You justify those things. So you've created an identity about you related to that. And that is your reaction. Everything is just a reaction. You're just reacting to things. And all of your reactions are made up because of whatever thought, feeling, emotion that you've had previously, and your brain's trying to keep you safe now because I noticed this pattern, they did this. This means if we do this, it'll keep us safe. But not all of those are serving you anymore. So if we identify that all of these are patterns, and I have an identity about myself, and now I realize that the strongest force inside my brain is the need for me to stay consistent with my identity of who I am. So if I'm just that way, I'm just a defensive person because I've always been this way. I'm just more of a shy person. I'm not someone who would go knock on doors. I'm not someone who makes cold calls. I don't want to bother my sphere when I call them. You want to stay consistent with that identity because at some point you showed yourself that when I call people, I bother them. You showed yourself that, well, I don't go knock on doors of strangers, stranger danger. We've been told that, and we created a pattern and an identity around that. Now it's very hard. We don't want to be wrong. How would it feel if you went and proved yourself wrong? Who here likes to be wrong? No one likes to be wrong. But if you go and break those patterns and do something different, there's a possibility you'll prove yourself wrong. So the strongest need to stay consistent with that identity keeps us in these patterns. But if you identify the pattern and the trigger, You interrupt that pattern in the trigger and you replace it with something that's more intentional, more positive, that creates a different kind of emotion. That's how you can slowly break a mindset, a pattern that you have inside of you. You can slowly try to break those. So those thoughts and beliefs that we have were all shaped, like I talked about, as a child. And a lot of them, it wasn't even because of anything that happened with you. It's just the way that your family was. It's the way that you saw things. Your family said, money doesn't grow on trees. No, we just don't call anybody after 8 p.m. That's not what we do. No, don't call them. Don't bother them. You're going to be a pest. You're going to be a nuisance. We've created these patterns that no longer serve us, and we have to be willing to identify them, interrupt them, and replace them. And once you do that, we have to stay consistent with these patterns. We have to stay consistent with these changes. I love this statement. It says, you wouldn't plant the seed and then go dig it up every few minutes to see if it grew. So why do you keep questioning yourself, your hard work, and your decisions? Have patience, stop overthinking, and keep watering your seeds. Most of us, we start looking for the result after the first time that we try to do something, and it's not how it works. The seed doesn't start sprouting roots right away, and you don't go dig that seed up to check and see if it has roots. But we do that every day with every single thing. Where's the result? Where's the result? Where's the result? Where's the result? It takes a while. Harvard did a study to show how long does it take to change a habit. And I've asked this before. If every single one of you goes on and tells me how long you think it takes to form a habit, some of you will say 14 days, some will say 7 days. Some of you will say 60 days, 100 days. Harvard study showed that the average was 21 days to form a habit. But what they don't tell you is in that study, it took anywhere from 5 days for some people to 200 days for others. The average was 21 days. So if you want to be consistent and you want to create an outcome, how long should you do it for? Most of us are going to say 21 days. We should do it 21 days to try to change this habit. My perspective is you should do it for 90 to 100 days. Because I have a philosophy on the whole process of change. And I believe it goes in 30-day increments. And if I believe that and I try to make a change, I think that that helps me to realize what's going on through my process. My 30-day increment changes are in the first 30 days, the first 2 weeks to 30 days. First 2 weeks is going to be really exciting. You're like, wow, this feels kind of cool. It's different. It's exciting. It's new. And everything new is typically exciting. Every time you go on vacation, you go to a new city. And when you get to that new city, what do you want to do? Let's look at home. I could move here. I could live here. This place is really cool. It's new and exciting and fun. But after about 2 weeks, between 2 weeks and 30 days, the newness wears off. And now your brain and body are starting to fall into their old patterns, and they don't match with the surroundings. And you start to feel uncomfortable. You start to feel a little lost. You start to feel like you're not in a rhythm. You don't have that same flow. So 2 weeks to 30 days, in that period, you start to have a breakdown or a breakthrough moment. What I mean by that is you either decide that you're going to walk away from that change because it wasn't that important to me. We could just go back to doing the way things were. I really didn't need the outcome I was going to get out of it. Was it really that bad the way that it was? You start giving yourself all the reasons why it's easier to go back to the thing you were doing rather than to push forward. But if you push through and break through, you continue to identify those triggers, interrupt that pattern that was, and replace it with a new pattern that serves you more, and find all of the reasons why this new pattern is beneficial and serving me, and you push past that 30-day mark, the brain starts to give up, and the drunk monkey throws his hands up and goes, okay, you're not giving up. Let me take a back seat. I'm going to let the nervous system take over. Let's start forming some habits and patterns that make this easier rather than going back. And during that 30 to 60 day mark, your brain starts to fire and wire new neurological connections, new synapses between the brain, the body, and the muscles. So it starts firing and wiring new signals. 30 to 60 days, now we're starting to create some patterns. We're starting to create a few of those habits. And then between 60 and 90 days, you get into a little bit of a flow state where now the patterns are feeling like they're having a result. Now I can focus on an individual. I can focus on a different part of it. I could focus on being better. I can learn different. I can learn more. I can get more out of this because my brain took some of the focus off of the things I was focusing on. Now I can have a new focus and learn more. And then you create a flow state. So I say after 90 days, you start to form more patterns, better patterns. And now you start to get results, which is why when I ask you to focus on a new avenue of business, let's do it for at least a quarter, because if you try to do it for a day, a week, or even a month, you're going to have more of a likelihood of going back. I can set a clock by most of this because the majority of you, whenever you decide you're going to commit to coaching, after 2 to 4 weeks, you stop. Happens almost every time. 1 out of 10 will continue on after 4 weeks, unless you're paying for it. And when you pay for it, you deem something more valuable and you show up and do more. I love this statement. Thoughts become things. Thoughts become a focus. Where your focus goes, your energy goes. Where your thoughts go, your beliefs go. You start to form a belief around something. When you have a belief around something, you want to stay consistent with that belief, and you start to form a habit. Thoughts become things. And every thought that we've ever had in our life is completely made up. I'm not good enough. Bullshit. Absolutely made up. It's because something happened to you and it was easier to believe you weren't good enough than to push forward and try to do something more, because it'd be more challenging to do more, show up different, create a change, be uncomfortable for a little bit. Every single thought that we have is completely made up. Something happens to you and you have a reactionary thought. How is it possible that two people can experience the same exact situation, the same exact movie, the same exact scenario in life, yet both of them can end up coming out completely different? Two people go to war, both of them end up in a horrible accident where they have an IED and they lose an arm, lose a limb, lose a leg. One of them comes back, says, my life is over. I'm never going to walk again. I'm never going to be able to do this. I'm never going to be able to do this. Ends up in drugs, ends up in alcohol, and ends up dying because of it. Or eventually killing themselves, which is the sad part of what happens sometimes. The other one comes back and says, sits in the hospital, sees other people that are going through the same thing he's going through, and realizes that he can be a light for them. And he can show them that their life is not over, and he can show them there's something worth living for. Same exact scenario, two different perspectives. Completely different outcomes. So every thought that we have is completely made up. If it wasn't, we would all have the same reaction to the same scenarios, the same things. But we're humans, we're independent thinkers. So every thought that you have is an independent thought that's completely made up with something that happened to us, or a different thought is maybe it happened for us. You have to change your perspective. So thoughts create feelings, feelings create emotions. When I have a thought, I automatically create a feeling about it. That feeling creates an emotion. That emotion creates a certain potential in me to react. That potential in me turns into an action. That action repeated over and over again creates a habit, all from one little thought. Every single thing that you look around inside this room, inside your car, was once just a thought. And because that person had that thought long enough, created enough feeling and emotion around it, that emotion created a certain potential in him to take action. That thought, I really wish I had this thing that I could put in front of me to sit down on, a chair. I wish I had something like that. And he had this feeling and emotions, felt so strong about it that he went out and built one and took action and developed something that now everybody uses inside of their house, inside an office, inside a car. They have this chair, this seat, this whatever it is. Started with a thought. And then it had a strong enough emotion around it. That emotion creates motion. There's a reason the two words sound very similar. The only difference is one letter. Just think about different scenarios again. I'll tell you a quick story. Lexus, during times, it was just before, I believe it was in the 90s. There was some war going on. It had everything. There was all kinds of production issues. Lexus was was building cars, but all the sales completely slowed down. People were not buying cars, wasn't happening. All of the dealerships around were saying, oh, well, nobody's buying cars. Nobody's buying anything. It's not happening. Similar to the story that some of us tell ourselves, nobody's buying houses right now. It's not affordable. No one's selling houses right now because there's so much on the market. It's not selling. They started, like the people inside these different dealerships were saying that and telling themselves that that's what the whole automotive industry was. There's one guy who owned a couple dealerships inside of town, and he decided, he goes, wait a minute. We just haven't shown them what our product is. It's just not at the top of their mind. What if we got in front of more people and showed them what our product was? Do you think that they might make a different decision with new information? They're just not focusing on it. So they found all of these events. They found these galas where there was rich people that showed up and still had these banquets and dinners and all these different events. And what they did is they contacted the people who were hosting these events and said, we'd love to bring our cars out there. We'll have a fleet of them. And we just want to expose them to people and give them free test drives, explain all of our product. So as people were leaving or coming in, they were coming and talking to them about their Lexus and said, hey, look at this product, look at our car. I'd love to have you take a free test drive. Who here has ever went for a test drive in a car before? And after you test drove the car that you really wanted, all of a sudden you fell in love, and then you went and got back in your car, your old POS or your old car that doesn't have this feature, the sunroof, the heated seats, whatever it was, and all of a sudden you wanted that new one even more. What happened was they ended up selling 2 times as many Lexuses as they had sold earlier that year, just from creating a different mindset. They had a different thought. What if it's not the market? What if they're just not exposed to us? What if they've not been exposed to the product? And they had a thought. They created from that thought, an event happened to them. It said, this is not good for our dealership. And then they had a different reaction to it. Maybe we just need to do this. And they created a different outcome. So everything is just events happen. We have a reaction to them and we create an outcome. So what is your reaction to this? How are you reacting to all of these things? That's all that your mindset is how you react to these things. And we create different habits around them. Let's talk about habits. I've talked about this one before. This is the flea experiment. They took fleas, and fleas can jump like crazy, crazy heights. It's like 200 sometimes the amount of like their height they can jump it. They put these fleas in a glass jar. When they put them in a glass jar, they all jumped out of the glass jar. Then they put them in a glass jar with a clear glass lid. The fleas can't see the glass lid. They just end up seeing that it's clear. They try to jump out. They keep hitting their head. As they keep hitting their head on this glass lid that they couldn't see, they realize that something's going on. Those fleas decided, because they have an event that happened to them, every time I jump, I hit my head. They have a reaction that says, every time I jump, I hit my head. I don't want to do that. And they have an outcome that says, let's not jump that high anymore. Even though they could jump 3 times that height, they stopped jumping and hitting their head on the glass lid after a period of time. The crazy part is whenever they removed the glass lid and the flea could no longer see the glass lid wasn't there, but they look up and they saw the same thing because it was a clear glass lid. The flea never jumped out of the jar. Never. Because that event happened to them, they had a reaction inside of them that created them to not jump so high, and the outcome was, this is as high as I jumped. That's it. Why? Because every time I jumped before, I hit my head on that glass lid. Crazy. The crazy part is whenever they had babies, the babies never jumped out of the jar either. But here's the really interesting part. They took an outside flea and introduced him to the jar without the lid. So they went through, they had the fleas in there, they put the lid on, the fleas kept hitting their head, they stopped jumping that high, they removed the lid, none of the fleas would jump out. They took an outside flea and put him in that jar. That flea had no idea about the lid. He jumped out of the jar. Because those other fleas that were still inside saw him jump out sooner rather than later, those fleas all jumped out of the jar as well, just from seeing another flea do that. Their whole life was shaped around, you can't jump that high. Every time you do, you hit your head. And then they saw someone do it And they're like, holy crap, maybe we can. And they did it themselves. And eventually they all jumped out of the jar. So sometimes we have to expose ourselves to new things, new thoughts. We have to expose ourselves to new people, to new stories. We have to get around them. It's crazy. This whole story is just crazy with the fleas. Where is it? I wanted to. But anyway, so sometimes you have to expose yourself to new people. Sometimes you have to learn new things. So this is one of the things to help cultivate a strong mindset is to change your focus, learn something new. You've heard the saying, you're the sum of the 5 people that you hang around. Hang around 9 smokers, you'll be the 10th. Hang around 9 alcoholics, you'll be the 10th. Hang around 9 people who are laughing and joking, playing playful all the time, you will be the 10th. You are the sum of the people that you surround yourself with. And these stories are just going to show that. So maybe you need a new sphere. Maybe you need some new surroundings. Maybe you need to decide to learn something new. Maybe next time Jared James, Tom Ferry, Mike Ferry, Century 21, any of these people come around, Tony Robbins, Les Brown, maybe you decide to buy a ticket and go and put yourself around people, put yourself in a different room. Because if the room that you're in is not creating the outcomes that you want, maybe it's not your job to change the room. Maybe it's your job to remove yourself from the room and surround yourself with different people. Sometimes you have to make that decision. So why don't we all decide today that we're going to create some type of change. We're going to study something new. I'm going to commit to learning something new this week, no matter what it is. Maybe you've always wanted to do woodworking. Sign up for one of those little classes they do at Home Depot. Go down there, bring your kid down and help them learn something new. Maybe you decide I'm going to sign up for the next Jared James event. Maybe you decide I saw this online course and I'm going to do that. I've always wanted to do hypnosis. I've always wanted to do yoga. I've always wanted to learn something new. Maybe you decide you're going to learn something new. That one little thing can be the spark that changes everything. And it'd be really beneficial if it was something that required you to move your body and exercise and do things like that, because one of the other ways to change your mindset is to begin some type of physical regimen of activity like exercise in some way, shape, or form, because again, motion creates emotion. You change your body, change your motion, you create a different outcome, create a different emotion. What else can you do to change your mindset? Be grateful, change your focus. Change your focus and change your story. Because right now we're all telling ourselves a story about why we don't have the things that we want. It's because I was born this way. It's because I did this. It's because you're just trying to stay consistent with the identity that you've created of yourself that you weren't even aware of you were doing over these past years. You know, they say that strong need to stay consistent with your identity. There's a reason why 65 to 70% of all lottery winners within 5 years of winning the lottery end up broke. Because they had an identity about money that was, you know, I'm a $50,000 a year earner, $20,000 a year earner. I do my taxes with QuickBooks. I do my taxes with H&R Block. I don't invest. I have this money. I just save and put money in the bank. You know, when I have money, it gets spent. So they had this identity about themselves and money, and they never changed their identity. They just continued to act the way they did before they won the lottery, and within 5 years of winning the lottery, 65 to 70% of them end up broke because of that need to stay consistent with their identity. Same thing, 65 to 70% of NFL players, when they leave the league within 5 years, end up broke. NBA players, same thing. There's a need to stay consistent with that. You have to identify that you right now are just going through a habitual cycle of the way that you've been. What are the most expensive words in any business? We've always done it that way. And if you've always done it that way, you're always going to continue to get the things you've always got until you decide to change your mindset and do something different. Make a commitment, make a change, do something different, create a different outcome. And with that, we will wrap it up. It's a beautiful Wednesday. It is March 26th, 5 days left in the month. Let's close this month out strong. End of the month, end of the first quarter. We have a new quarter starting. Now would be a good time to commit to making a change. Now would be a good time to commit to doing something new in the second quarter. It's a time. It's the time to do it. It doesn't matter what's going on in the market. It doesn't matter what's happening around it. I can pull all of the stats from any one of your markets and I can show you that people are listing their homes. People are selling their homes. Buyers are buying those homes. And there's plenty of it happening. You just have to cultivate a different mindset, a different story, a different belief. And you have to show up differently and have a different reaction to the things that are happening to you and create a different outcome. Happy Wednesday. Have a wonderful day.